you notice that brand new Friends Without Benefits intro? My friend Mike Relm, who is the DJ for The Far Side. So I was like, can you make me something? And he was like, yeah, and he made that. So he's an awesome DJ, musician, producer, YouTuber. Check out MikeRelm.com. Want to thank him for that cool new intro. Alicia Malone, who's my guest, just shoved her book in my face even before we got. No, she just shoved it in my face like the PR machine she is. She just shoved it in there.
I brought it to show you just because I'm so proud of it. Like I actually wrote a thing, which is weird.
Well, there's a couple of typos right in the cover here,
Oh,
but
no,
bummer. We should have checked that. It's the Friends Without Benefits podcast. My name is Jason Horton, and I am here with Alicia Malone, which we've known each other randomly for a while.
I was trying to think of when we first met, and I think it was doing some kind of Yahoo show about movies. But I already knew who you were, though, because I'd seen some YouTube videos, and so I was like, oh, yeah, hi, Jason, I wanted to meet you. And so then that was cool. And then we were just in the same circle. I followed you on Instagram since then, so I feel like I know you better than I do.
Yeah. The tables have turned. Now you're like, which podcast? I just interviewed Al Gore. I did a Q&A with him yesterday. So what is this thing you do? So the tables have turned.
Al Gore, Jason Horton, same thing.
What's the difference?
Yeah, no difference.
We met at Yahoo, and I think it was like a movie thing. It was like the Michael Yo show. I remember doing the Michael Yo show.
Oh yeah, Michael Yo show. That's what it was.
And we had a mutual friend, Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda
Depover. Yeah. So
and now she's a nurse.
And now she's and you know what? Like she's super funny. I always thought she was super funny. She was like a really good comedian. I really liked her. And I was like, a friend of yours.
Now she's like saving kids.
Yeah. But what are we doing? Well, at least you're offering reading material.
Trying to.
And I'm not even doing that. But we're going to talk about your book, Backwards in Heels: The Past, Present, and Future of Women Working in Film.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got your name right on it.
I know. That's crazy. So, you work on something for so long, and this is my first book, and then to get that's the first copy there. So to get that and see it's actually a book, it's not just a really long Word document. Like now it feels like I wrote a book. Before it was like, oh, I just wrote a long essay.
They just kept saving.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Save, back up. But yeah, to see my name on the cover, that's been a lifelong dream.
Yeah. Well, let's go to where the dream starts. You are from Australia.
Yes, as you can
I'm telling you, you're from there.
From this
accent.
accent.
I'm not asking. So what? So I was on the car way over here. I thought myself living in New York or New Jersey or just living. I lived in the United States. Where a lot of people, there's Hollywood's here and like New York and I always felt like, wow, I was like, this is so cool. Like, I wish I could be part of this, but I always considered myself like very outside. Most of us are outside looking in. Mm-hmm. It has to be. Not everyone could. Well, in LA, everyone's connected to the industry. Living in Australia, like, what was that like for you? Because physically the United States is very far away, but did it? I don't know what your dreams were, but did it seem like it was very far away as far as like achieving any of that?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. Not many people know that. Everyone thinks it's Sydney, but not much happens there.
I knew that.
Oh, you did?
Nope.
Super smart.
Nope.
So it's kind of like a big country town. It's a city, but it's very small. And nothing really happens there. So I loved movies from an early age, and I would dream about Hollywood and going to America. And Australians know a lot about America because we get so much of the content. I grew up watching Friends and Seinfeld and all these American shows.
You only got that in 2015, right? Seinfeld,
yeah.
Is that how that works?
It's like finally just started.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. And so I felt like I learned about America through film and watching television. I always dreamed about going there, but I was someone who, my family, we never really traveled. We got up to Sydney, and that was as far as we went. And my school friends would always go to America, go to Disneyland for holidays and trips. And
you resented them, of course.
Yeah, I would make my friend write me a detailed letter of every single thing that went on, including the plane. I was so fascinated about the plane, what kind of food do you eat, and what do people do on the plane? And I was like, write everything from the plane, and then everything you see at Disneyland, and I wanted to know everything. So it really had this mythical quality to it, but it felt so far away. in Australia, you do feel completely isolated being on the other side of the world.
So what did you have a game plan, or was there something else you were like, well, I guess I'll just be a
Yeah.
something else, or was it like, no, the dream is the dream, and I'm gonna get there?
The dream was just to go to Sydney. Like that was far for me. That was the big smoke, and that was so exciting.
What was
So
there that was like?
it's like it was a city, it was hustle and bustle, and I decided. So when I was young, I actually wanted to be a film director, and then I read a lot of books and I watched a lot of movies, and I came to the conclusion, which is kind of right, that it's really hard to be a director if you're a woman. Plus, I was really shy, so I didn't think I could lead a crew. So I wanted to work in television and work behind the scenes in television. So I moved from Canberra to Sydney, didn't go to university, and just started.
How'd your family feel about it? Was your family?
They were concerned. Like, I think my mum, I mean, she obviously wanted the best for me, and she would have preferred if I went to university to get a degree in something, anything.
But you
to
didn't.
have.
Did you even have a something like, oh, maybe I'll do? No.
No.
Wow. So
And
you weren't even like, oh, maybe I could do business. You know, think
No.
that backup, or I could do business or marketing.
I was like, I'm going to work in television, and I don't know what that looks like, and I don't have any idea of that. But I thought television seemed more. It seemed more accessible than film. In film, I realized that they were really long days as well, and I didn't think I had the patience for that. So I was like, quick television, live television is where I wanted to work. And I remember telling my careers advisor at school that I wanted to work in television, and she was like, well, it's pretty hard, and maybe you should consider something else. I was like, nope. And I've always kind of been like that, of like, nope, this is what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out some way or another.
And what did you do to get to Sydney? Did you have to like get a 10 jobs, or you just
Well, yeah, I had a lot of jobs, and one that was my favorite was working at the video store. And it was a local video store. It was like just down the road from the place that I rented with my sister, my friend, and her friend. And I shared a futon bed with my sister because I had no money. But I loved working at the video store, and I'd work there all day, and I'd tell everyone my recommendations and put my favorite movie on the screens while I was working, and it was the best time
So
ever.
you were a team. You were a video store team player.
Yeah.
Because there's two different kinds. I worked at a Blockbuster.
Oh, love it.
Which I've had so many jobs. I just couldn't stick with jobs. There was nothing that I really liked. But for some reason, randomly, and it was only after the fact, I was like, I really liked working at Blockbuster. And it wasn't even so much that I like recommended movies. There was just something about the environment and the stacking of the movies and the way that it looked, and maybe the people that I work with and the people that came in, getting a little kind of glimpse inside, like, oh, interesting.
It was like a community feel.
Yeah, you don't look like you like this movie, or I'm surprised you're looking for that movie.
Yeah.
Although when Blockbuster first opened in my area, I don't know what kind of video store you worked at, if it had an adult section, but Blockbuster did not. And guys would come in, and after a while they would come up to the counter. I'd be like, "There's no porn here." I didn't even let the words. It was like it was comical because I could just look in their eyes, being a guy, and be like, "You look like the kind of guy that is looking for pornography. It is not here in this store." So that was a funny thing. And I think when Blockbusters opened at first, you know what I mean? Like that was like, where's the adult section?
Yeah, behind the curtain.
Yeah.
We had we had a XXX shelf, but they were kind of just the soft core stuff.
Yeah.
A lot
did you
of,
have recommendations there, or did you keep it?
Edward Penis Hands was actually pretty
classic.
well done.
Classic, yeah.
I always loved that, the kind of spoof of a movie.
Yeah.
Porn-wise, and they would be kind of embarrassed bringing up the film to me to scan, because you'd have to open up the cover and beep, scan the VHS. But I
or
loved
they get over
it
the loudspeaker,
so much.
like Edward Penis Hands.
Yeah.
Is there a
or give them a call when they were late with it, returning, like hi, and you have to leave like on an answering machine back in those days, like, hi, this is Alicia from Video Easy in Leichhardt. Just wanted to let you know that Edward Penis Hands is 2 days late, and you're gonna have to keep paying late fees unless you bring it in.
Yeah, now, it's something that I think about, and I've been doing stand-up comedy. Well, it's something I've been terrified. Now I've started doing it.
How do you do that? That sounds like the most terrifying thing to me.
Well, as we're speaking right now, a week ago I had not done it, and I've only been writing it. I've kind of done like characters, and I've done storytelling, but I've never done stand-up, and it's absolutely terrifying. Not getting in front of people. I've done live performances at the Palladium with other people, and there was like thousands of people, no fear. But getting up in front of like people that don't even care. They're just there to do their own thing. They're not even paying attention. Was absolutely terrifying. But one thing I was thinking of as I was looking back is the only obstacle to getting your hands on as much porn. This is not going to be a pornography. I'm not taking a hard right turn to pornography. But if you want to get your hands on pornography, the only obstacle is having a little tiny bit of electricity, right?
Yeah.
It's the only thing that's keeping you from all the pornography in the world.
I was talking about this with a friend the other day, kind of being nostalgic for the times when you had to really seek it out. You know, you had to like pass the magazines, or you had to get the VHS somehow, or, you know, discover like the Joy of Sex book somewhere. And really you had to be discreet about it and quiet. And there was something to that seeking out, which I think is missing now. Now it's so accessible. And I do think that's missing, that idea of like, it's hard to find, you have to find it. And also the idea of stories in porn. Like, I loved those. How are these two people going to have sex? Like, they're strangers. What's going to happen? And now it's just about like the money shot.
There's no magic unfolding.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for like, this is all part of like some things that I talk about and I write about is the espionage of getting your hands. It's like episodes of like Homeland, but for pornography,
it's
and
sweet in a
you'll
way.
stop at nothing to get your hands on a videotape, and that's as exciting as actually getting it.
Exactly.
Is getting like the thought and the promise of like, oh, your dad has a bunch of tapes. Or I would stand out in front of like a gas station at like 12, 13 years old with one of my other perverted friends and profile dudes that look like they might buy us like a Playboy magazine, which is very, very creepy and really illegal and probably really bad for the person that would do that. And now I kind of realized after years, I was like, the kind of person I was profiling was somebody who probably looks like me now, which kind of like, I'm kind of like, oh, it all goes for full circle.
Yeah, but I also love the idea of like, by the time you got the porn, watching it was another, like, how are we going to watch it when your mum goes out, and then you're watching it and you're pretty much just scared the entire time that someone's going to bust you.
You're just kind of always looking at it and then looking at something else.
Yeah, you're like, oh gosh, and someone's going to walk in any minute and I've got it on the VHS, you know. So
but that's part of it. That's part of the exhilaration. I think just now,
I feel sad for kids these days that they don't have that fun.
Yeah, they don't, and I think they're probably a little more desensitized to it, which maybe that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's the fact that you know that it's there might be like, well, it's always going to be there. I'm in no like dire need to get my hands on it, which might be good or whatever. But for me, it was the only thing that mattered.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, and for me, it was just like, I'm really curious about this. And then the fact that these days it's there and it's pretty hardcore, some of the stuff you can find just straight away. I mean,
some of those people aren't even married.
Like,
they're not even in love with
each
other.
Even in love.
I know.
It's so.
I mean, just a few of them. Most of them aren't in love.
You
obviously.
know, there's no like the pizza guy or the pool guy anymore. Like, come on.
Yeah.
It's just like, gee, wham, bam, thank you, man. But and I do wonder if that distorts people's perception of sex. You know, when you're young and you're exposed to that, as opposed to like having to seek out things and having to sit through the story parts.
I mean, it's all in your book.
Yeah,
it's all in your book, backwards and heels.
I talk about porn.
Yeah, for the majority of it. So you get to Sydney, and what happens?
I get to Sydney, and so I enrolled in a TV production course, which was just a very general course. It was just something for me to do when I got to Sydney. I got a scholarship to that course, which I felt very proud of until I realized that they pretty much give that to every single person that joins. But hey, you know, I went there, and so through there, I met this girl who started working at a TV station, Channel 7 in Australia, because of her drama teacher who knew someone. So anyway, she was working there, and they said to her, Channel 7 said, you know, we've got the Olympics coming up in Sydney in 2000. We need more people. Is there anyone at your course that you would recommend to come and train on how to roll teleprompter? And she was like, yeah, my friend Alicia, she really wants to do this. So then I got involved there, and I got to be at the Olympics. And so I worked at Channel 7. So I had to say goodbye to Video Easy, unfortunately. But
I love those names. It's like Video Hot.
I know.
Video
and it was
Easy.
Like EZY.
Oh, okay.
Video Easy.
Oh.
And so then, I gave up that and started working at Channel 7 and worked there in a variety of behind-the-scenes roles for 6 years. so doing like graphics on the news and
so you kind of like really submerge yourself into like a lot of aspects of it and
yes.
learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm a big geek for all that stuff. So I wanted to learn as much as I could about the television process, live television. It was a morning show, much like today's show over here called Sunrise, which still goes in Australia. And so I was there at the start of that show, and then I'd have to get up at 3 a.m. for a 4 a.m. shift and do that from 4 till 9 and then go to the course all day and do it again. But I loved it so much.
So it doesn't seem like work.
No, not at all.
And so was there a plan of like, get me to the U.S. so I can rock these people's worlds?
Not really, no. I mean, it was always in my mind of a dream to go to Hollywood just because I loved classic film and it seemed so glamorous. And I'd watch the Oscars every year and all that stuff. But I didn't really think about that until later on, till like probably close to moving over here. So probably till I was like 28 or 29. Then I thought, you know what, I'm going to move to LA. And again, I just picked up and left.
And did you make any inroads in so when you got here, or you just like, I'm going to show up and just see what I get?
I packed my 2 suitcases and my teddy bear and off I went.
And you had your kind of how to make it in Hollywood book and your Oscar for world's best
exactly.
teleprompter.
Dreams in my eyes.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why I was confident that it was going to be fine, because I had no work contacts, I had no friends, I didn't know a single person here in LA, and I didn't have any money saved up.
Okay.
So I was like, but I'm going to do it.
So
again, that determined thing about, nope, I'm going to do it.
Had you been to the United States before or no?
I had briefly on like a little holiday, trip.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd been to New York and I'd been to LA.
So
and taste. LA, I was when I first came and I was like, oh, I'm gonna see all these celebrities walking down the street, and I want to go see where the Oscars are. And then you get to Hollywood Boulevard, and you're like, why is this so depressing?
And it's probably, I mean, if you live in LA. You avoid Hollywood and Highland at all costs.
Absolutely.
I just do not drive through there. I mean, the Man's Chinese Theater is pretty cool. They have, I've had some stuff screened there. Yeah.
The TCM Classic Film Festival is wonderful there, but just to go as a tourist is not fun.
No, and you're not going to see any. You'd probably see maybe me or you.
Yeah.
Possibly. If we're going to like Baja Fresh or something like that. That's about it. Like, oh, this is not that much fun.
That's the level of celebrity you see.
So when you got here, I'm very, very curious. Like, what did you do when you got here with really no real plan?
Also, the tricky thing was the visa that I got to move over to the States prevented me from doing anything else but working in entertainment. Okay. So, and I couldn't even work behind the scenes in entertainment. I had to be on camera in entertainment. So that's a lot of pressure. I couldn't work at a bar. I couldn't, do anything. So I just started, emailing people back in Australia who I'd worked with, like, hey, I'm in LA now. I can cover junkets for you, press junkets over here, and just started really hustling. I'd done a lot of that stuff in Australia, so I'd been on camera for a couple of years, and I'd done a lot of interviews.
You had a reel probably of your stuff?
Yeah, reels, and I done a ton of interviews. So I thought, okay, that's probably my best bet, is to do press junkets from LA for Australian television. So I just started emailing, and then finally, one girl who worked over here, she was Australian, she decided she wanted to move back to Sydney, and she wanted to get out of her contract she was on. So she knew that it would be a great plan if she said, I really want to move back to Sydney, but here's a girl ready waiting.
And the accents are you're not going to even notice the difference.
Yeah,
Seamless.
Exactly. Seamless. So they were happy that there was a replacement there straight away. So then I started slowly working for Australian television here in LA, covering junkets. But it was like few and far between junkets. So there was a time when I didn't have a credit rating. When you move over here, you start with 0 credit rating, which is worse than having a bad credit rating. So I couldn't get a car. I didn't have money for a car.
What part of LA were you living?
I was living West Hollywood.
Oh, well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so I was sharing an apartment with an Australian who was a friend of a friend of a friend, that kind of thing. And so I bought a bike. So then I would ride the bicycle down to junkets And when I was at so I put my heels in the front basket, ride from West Hollywood to Beverly Hills.
Is this a romantic comedy?
It feels like it,
yeah.
doesn't it? Ask the valet guys, like, can they valet my bike? They're like, just park it down there. And then I would go up to the junkets and I would basically stuff my bag full of all the snacks because it's my only chance to eat that day. And then do the interviews and then ride back on my bicycle. And I survived like that for a little while.
With the person that left...
Or go on dates just to eat dinner.
Yeah. Oh, well, listen. As a guy who's dated, we know. We know.
And then just being terrified, because you have to do the like reach for your wallet at the end. Yeah. It's polite, but being terrified that they would take you up on that, you'd be like, oh gosh.
No, actually, I never.
This credit card might not go through.
I know that feeling. I've never. Anytime I've never been like, oh, it's just somebody's trying to, somebody's trying to scam. No, it was usually kind of like, oh, they don't like me because of me, not because they're out to get something. It's authentic.
Yeah.
So your person that left, were you like, how could you be leaving? How could you leave LA?
Yes.
Did that make you kind of second guess you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, well, she was like, she'd done the junket scene and red carpets and stuff for 3 years, and she was like, ugh, I'm over it. If I have to interview this person again. And at the time I was like, how can that's so exciting. You get to talk to these celebrities. And now I've done so many junkets that I'm like, oh God, 3 minutes with so-and-so, oh God. So it's funny that it comes full circle. But yeah, I was like, how can you leave? This is such a good job. But, I was really grateful that she suggested me. Thank God.
So basically you would it was... As soon as you got you'd have to get the credentials to be on the red carpet and kind of wait for that. So what did you, I don't know if there was things happening literally every day for you, but like what was happening in between?
So I decided
dating for free food.
I decided to approach it as if I was, like an actor in training or something, that I was just waiting for my big role. Yeah. And so I'd go to the gym every day. I would go to like a cafe and read my book.
How did you survive money-wise?
Money-wise, very frugally.
Yeah.
So just like I remember once I wanted to go to Sundance Film Festival and I only had 25 cents in the bank, but I was determined to go. So off I went and I slept on someone's floor and I ate the free veggie burgers at the pop-up place.
Yeah.
But I saw movies. So I don't know, I survived somehow.
Because
one way or
when
the
you're
other,
there,
figured it out.
Like, if I saw you at Sundance or I see you at a junket on your bike, I don't see, she only has 25 cents in her bank account.
Know.
I assume you're quirky or you're environmental and you're just being you, but you do what you have to do to kind of follow instead of making, because it would be very easy for you to make excuses. You had valid excuses why this might not be working out for you at this point.
Yeah.
Where other people have more and they're just not willing to do it and they kind of squander their opportunities.
Yeah.
Whereas people like you is like, I have 25 cents. I mean, there's somebody with a negative bank account, just saying.
Yeah, for sure.
So you, at least you were on the plus.
I was on the plus side.
Yeah.
And the times it did feel silly. It's like, is this really superficial of me to just be here chasing this dream of just wanting to talk about movies? Maybe I should just go back home and just like settle and just have a regular job and just have money. Because there was a time when I was like, I'm 32 and I have no money. Like, this is ridiculous. I should be, all my friends are married with kids and they've got their life sorted. They're buying investment properties.
Yeah.
And I'm just over here like being like, but I want to be in LA and make it. And it's like, am I stupid? But something just kept me going where I was like, no, this is where I'm supposed to be. I'd just see something or meet someone and it would be like, oh no, this is a sign.
It would keep you, like, sometimes these little things, like you're like, it's a bummer. Like I would be, I had those same feelings like everyone. And then some little thing would happen and I'd be like, oh, this is keeping me afloat another day. It's not even necessarily financial, but a cool meeting or an opportunity that didn't happen yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is enough to let me know it's worth making it another day in this business. So what was your first like I don't know what the big break would be in this kind of, I mean, I've done I've gone to some invited, oh, you want to do some, as like a YouTube person or whatever, but that's not really necessarily my thing. In fact, anytime I did junkets, I remember doing one for this movie it's like 21 and over.
21 at Saddle Ranch?
Saddle Ranch.
Yes,
I did that, but what I did was I interviewed them. I don't know if it was like Relativity, whoever did not like what I did. Obviously, if you have watched my YouTube videos, is that I would do Twitter questions. But all the Twitter questions were like these fake Twitter questions that I sent myself about a girl that just dumped me. So I'm asking them all these questions, but they are really just questions about me, and they're just kind of just sitting there.
That's so funny.
And then there was one thing about Miles Teller, and it was something because I sat in a very, very low chair on purpose, and they were sitting in these high chairs, and I was like eye level with his penis or whatever.
Oh,
and we made some kind of joke together, and he like unzipped his pants, like he was gay, like he just being fun and unzipped his pants.
Yeah.
We made some kind of like hard PG-13 joke about his you know what I mean? And they were like, you can't show that, you can't talk about that. We're so mad. So that's why I don't do those things. But what
They're
is
very
what is the
restrictive.
first big break for something like that where you're like, oh, this is gonna like kind of catapult me a little bit?
Well, I think it was when I started getting people from American online outlets or television asking if I wanted to do junkets for them. That for me was like, oh wow, other places, not just Australia. So I did pretty well with doing junkets in Australia, and slowly they started building. It was funny at the times when I was broke to do such a glamorous job, so it's so at odds, But then slowly the money started to get a bit better, and then I started to meet other people at junkets, other hosts and producers, and then I think it was when people said, would you like to do junkets for us? And they were American outlets. I was like, oh wow, I've made it now. And for that, I needed to get another visa. So then that was like a different visa, but to get that was a big step. So I think there's just been like several big steps. And I think only now I'm sort of looking back and going, well, yeah, I've really achieved everything that I wanted to all of a sudden. And now I'm at a really good position where I'm doing really well.
And that whole time, are you like, as somebody who's like understanding like building equity into your own brand, which is a terrible, ugly, disgusting word, but
I know.
it fits the thing.
It's the only thing to describe the thing.
Were you always like conscious of like, I need to keep investing equity into my own me, like whether it's like an Instagram account or a website or a place to be like where you're like a commodity, so when people are like, hey, who should we get to do this? Well, we should get Alicia. She's done all this stuff, but she also has like a pretty big social media following.
Exactly, yeah.
Did that just kind of happen, or were you conscious of that?
It kind of happened, but I also would think of things to do. And people say to me like, oh, you're really good at branding yourself. And I never really consciously thought of it in that way. But I was like, oh, social media is a way for me to share what I really love, which is like independent films, classic films, and talking about women in film. But then with the junket side of things, I thought, you go in there and you're one of 100 people that they're talking to that day.
They're just it's
a factory.
Yeah, it's like
speed dating, but with no results.
They stay in those seats, right? When you see those kind of side, because it's always like you guys are opposite each other.
Yeah.
So every time like you show like I'm talking to Ryan Gosling, it's always you.
Yes.
Then the other picture is and any of those junkets. So it's like speed dating. They're just getting rotating out.
Next, like Notting Hill.
Yeah.
Where he pretends to be from Horse and Hound.
Yeah.
It's like that. And so I thought, okay, I need something that is kind of my signature, something that stands out a little bit. And because I've always been a little bit shy, I try to force myself to do things that are out of my comfort zone just for the experience of it. So I thought, what's the scariest thing that I could ask a celebrity who, you walk in the room and it's their room and you're not supposed to touch them. You might be able to shake hands with them, but that's about it. They're untouchable and they don't seem quite human. I thought, how about if I ask them for a hug? Okay. Firstly, I was like, that's a big thing for me to ask them for a hug. That's my own personal challenge. And B, like, I wonder if they'll go for it. But C, they also have to because the camera's rolling, right? So they can't be rude.
Yeah, they're promoting. They're hoping their movie or TV show is going to be successful.
Yeah.
So
and also that might make me memorable. So the next time I walk in, they'll be like, oh, yeah, you're the girl that asked for a hug. Yeah. And then, so I started doing that at the end of all my interviews. I'd say, and can we end with a hug? Yeah. And I would give them a hug. And some people really loved it. Some just tolerated it.
Is there anyone that, I mean, I don't know if you want to name.
Yeah, Jared Leto said no.
Did he say it in a nice way?
He said it in a nice way. He was like, and I'd been warned before I went in that he doesn't really like to shake hands either, and which is understandable when you're.
Because I know a lot of people don't like him, but I want to like him.
Yeah,
so.
I like him. I think he's intense, but I really like him.
Yeah.
And so he said, no, how about we try something else? So I said, all right, how about, and I thought of another thing that would scare me. I was like, how about if we just sit here and stare at each other?
Yeah.
And not say anything.
Yeah.
So we just sat there, stared at each other and kept eye contact. And he was like, okay, that was awkward.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the camera stopped rolling, he said, come here, I'll give you a hug.
Oh, okay.
So, and that was nice.
Yeah.
But mostly they're down for it. And so that started to be a signature that they remembered me. And it was a nice thing to be remembered by. I put a still on social media and people started to enjoy that. And so I think that became a brand in a way. But the social media stuff didn't take off till I was joining other successful brands that had the followers already.
I know we've talked recently. You talked about a huge love of independent films.
Yes.
Did that come about? I mean, not to love independent films is just to love independent films, but maybe you being so interactive with Hollywood movies and the big. Everything big, did that kind of been like, I'm so saturated with like big Hollywood stuff. Like there's all these great independent movies that might not necessarily have like huge junkets all day, every day and like stuff on like McDonald's cups or whatever the case may be. Did that kind of help like build up that love for independent films for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember, watching a bunch of indie movies in the 90s, Tarantino and Soderbergh and Fincher, and having that really blow my mind, and David Lynch and artists like that. But I was definitely more involved in the bigger films in Australia. And when I moved over here, I was so excited to be part of it. And the one thing that really stood out to me at these junkets was, and it still confuses me, that a lot of the other people who do junkets don't necessarily love movies. And they don't watch a lot of movies outside the movies that they have to watch for work. And so I'd be trying to talk to people about indie films, about classic films, and I realized pretty quickly they don't really care. They just want to be on camera, or they're doing a different thing. They're a news host or entertainment news.
They're just like a vessel for information.
Yeah,
not necessarily
not
like inherent
because
love.
they love
Sure.
films. Yeah. So and then the oversaturation of it. When I started working on a couple of movie shows that were very focused on comic book movies and no one wanted to talk about these indies, I think that made me even more like, no, these are ones that we should talk about, because if you love movies, you should love all movies. You should try these other movies. And then noticing how little cut through they get with marketing and how much it is so much about the big films. And even now, I think, I look at all these channels and they all cover the same stuff. Spider-Man trailer comes out and every single channel covers the
Does
Spider-Man
Spider-Man's butt look big in the new Spider-Man,
and
or is his butt smaller?
Can we also extend it just a little bit? Like, can we talk about Spider-Man and then also maybe talk about some indie films? Because these are the films that really need help too. And there's some great movies in there that are undiscovered gems. And I love being able to recommend that to people.
And those sometimes, a lot of times, are the movies that are inspiring in some way these directors and writers and stuff like that.
Where they all come from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talk about Spider-Man Homecoming. You've got Tom Holland, who was in The Impossible, and a bunch of other indies. And John Watts, this is his second film after making Cop Car, which is a tiny indie. So it's like these are where all the talent is coming from. And I think there should be more of an inclusion of these films.
So we're going to talk about your book, Backwards in Heels. I always, I always think about, how do I write a book? Like, how does that, because there was a point where there was no book.
Yeah.
Like, my hand would just be going through the air and you'd be like, why are you just waving over the table? But now I'm touching a book with pages.
Yeah, it looks like a real book.
Oh, it's just a picture book. It's just three where I like movies and a picture of a movie theater. Oh, no, it's a book and it's a dense book. How did this happen?
Yeah, always been on my bucket list of things I wanted to do. And I always said, even when I was young, like, more exciting than seeing my face on screen would be to see my name in print. And I grew up loving books, still read 2 books at a time all the time. So I've always wanted to do it. And then I was actually talking to Chris Stuckman, who's a YouTuber focusing on movies, a really sweet guy. And he was telling me about his book that he was writing, which was like 50 films movie buffs should see. And so I asked him about it and I was like, I don't really tell people this. I've always taken writing courses and I've always written little blogs or written just for myself. I have a notebook that I write in every day. And I said, I've always wanted to write a book, but what is it like? What's the process? And how did you get the publisher? And then he said, my publisher is always asking me for recommendations of other people who could write books about film. Do you want me to recommend you? I was like, yes, that'd be amazing. And so then he recommended me to them. They looked at my stuff and they saw that I'd done a TEDx talk or 2 TEDx talks about women in film. And so they
How does
contacted
that
me.
happen?
That,
I just started
yeah.
watching a couple of TED Talks
It's so
recently.
great.
So, and there's some I've watched and I'm like, this is great. Some of it, sometimes I watch it and I feel like I'm just kind of watching an inspirational meme type thing sometimes, and not to take away because everything's valuable to different people. But
Absolutely.
how do you do a TED how do you
Yeah.
do a TED Talk?
That was another bucket list item. So you can apply to do a TED Talk, and there's all these TEDx events, which are the smaller events. The TED conference is the big one, and they happen all around the country every single day, all around the world, really. But I actually got that through a friend who was helping to organize a TEDx conference, and so they said you should apply because you're always talking about women in film on these shows that you do. And it would be really interesting, I think, if you got up and you talked about why you're so passionate about it. And I wanted to do one, but I hadn't really thought of it that way. So I thought, okay, I'll apply. And then I got in. And then from there, you work with a coach who helps you to shape your talk. And it is difficult because it's like, what is the idea worth sharing? And that's the bottom line. You have to think of like, what can people take away from this talk that they've never heard before, they've never thought about before, something they can put into action tomorrow. And so it was really hard to figure out what to say and how to structure it. But I had so much fun doing it, and then did the first one, and that went really well. And that was at a small conference. And then I got asked to speak at a bigger conference about the same subject, but something slightly different with women in film. So that was really great too. So the publisher had seen those, and they said, I think there's a book here and I think you could explore this topic further. Would you be interested? And I was like, yes, dream. And
But at that point you had there was nothing.
No, so it kind of went backwards because
Yeah.
usually, you'll write a book and then you'll submit it, or
Yeah.
you at least have done a lot of research and you have a book proposal. So then he was like, okay, well, send me 3 ideas of what you could do. So then I spent a long time like crafting proposals and figuring out what I could do. The one looking at past, present, future, and sort of the history of women in film is what they went for. But it was tough because then it happened really quickly where it was like, okay, cool, we'll make this. Here's the book deal. Look it over. Went back and forth on that. Okay, great. You got 5 months. Go.
I mean, was day one of the 5 months? I mean, were you like?
Yeah. So they said, okay, your introduction is due by the end of the week. So I was like, okay, so I have to write an intro, not really knowing what the whole book will be. And so, of course, I rewrote it later, but that was something to start with. And so I had to lock myself away pretty much for 5 months, not see anyone. Occasionally I would come out to do shows and stuff online, but it was intense. And every spare minute I would be spent researching, writing, and I actually wrote the whole first draft. And then as soon as I finished writing the first draft, I realized a much better way to structure the entire book. So then I rewrote it all in like half the time.
So, I mean, for the people out there that want to write a book, like pretend it's a tiny TED Talk.
Yeah.
How would you go and write your next book, or tell people how to write a book if you've never written a book?
Yeah, the next book I would definitely really work on the idea, structure it out of how you think it could go, and then spend a couple of months researching before you even write. So if I write another book, that's what I'm going to say that I need to really have time to research and not write and research at the same time, because it's really hard to know where it's going to end up when you're.
Because then you're writing kind of an infinitum, right? You're just
exactly.
writing.
You
with
know
no
where
end.
it's going to end. So I would say spend a couple of months doing research if it's a nonfiction book like mine is, and then sit down and craft. But you just have to do it, and you just have to write. And it's like, even if you have no idea what you're going to do, it's a blank page. Just free write for 20 minutes and just force yourself to do it, and then stuff will come out of it, and then you can rewrite. It's all in the rewriting. So it's kind of like, just get it out, get words on the page, then go back and really finesse it. And get a lot of advice. I sent it out to all my friends. I had my writing teacher who looked over it.
Yeah.
I mean, every single word in that book is mine, but I had to really get some advice of like, does this make sense? Is this interesting?
You don't have like is there ever like an editor involved?
There is, but surprisingly, they don't do a whole lot in terms of structure. It's mainly typos.
Oh, okay.
So, and it might not be the experience at every publisher, but a couple of people I've spoken to from who've written other books have said the same thing, that they were surprised at how hands-off they are. That they're just like, here's your deadlines, and you send in your chapter by chapter by chapter, and then they send back notes, but it's really, it might be like expand here or this is unnecessary, but it's not like, how about you start your piece with this and move this around.
More on Edward Penis Hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Expand that chapter.
Yeah, I want to know more about this Edward and his penis for hands.
Yes. So like when you're pitching the book, like, hey, you know, I have a book. I know it's just the past, present, and future of women working in film. Is it just like a history book, or is it your kind of through your point of view, or?
Yeah, I started doing it both ways. So first I started like a history book that was very chronological, and then I realized that was quite boring. And then I started to insert more of me in there, and then I realized that felt like a bit much to insert a lot of myself in there. So what I did was I realized that the most interesting thing in the history parts that I wrote were the stories. So the stories about women. So instead of just having like one sentence on like the first person ever to be called film editor was a woman named Margaret Booth. It's like, okay, so what's her story? So the way I've divided it is looking at each era of Hollywood, but picking out 4 or 5 different stories from women who have done amazing things or tried to do amazing things or were held back in one way or another or accomplished great goals, and look at the history through those stories. So each chapter starts with an overview of what was happening in Hollywood, you know, during the 1920s, and then it's like 4 or 5 stories from the 1920s. And I try to involve filmmakers, actors, and then when I get into the present, I did interviews for all that. So I interviewed producer, cinematographer, writer, actors.
So you tapped into your kind of like
it's
your bread and butter of what you do in order to extract information.
Yeah, and I got some great people: Gina Davis, J.J. Abrams, Paul Feig.
Never heard of them. Never heard of them. Oh, those are men. Okay,
those are men,
this book is already
it's like
fake.
Men who help women.
Yeah.
Octavia Spencer, America Ferrera. You know, it's really lucky to get a bunch of great people.
I mean, that really, honestly, I'm sure there's other books in a similar world,
there are,
but to get, you know, when J.J. Abrams or Octavia Spencer or whoever you get agree to talk to you about your book is, I mean, it gives you a lot of credibility.
It's amazing. I couldn't believe it. It's so much fun because usually you're doing interviews for other people.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, what does my TV outlet need me to get about this film? And then
you hired yourself to do it for yourself.
It's like, what do I want to ask?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And it was great, and they all were very generous with their time, and you do it all over the phone, and but it was so fun. I mean, Ava DuVernay I spoke to, and when I hung up the phone, I felt like I could take on the world because she's just so empowering and cool. So I was really, really happy to get that. And I did think when I started the book that the final chapter, and I say in the book too, that I thought the final chapter was just going to be all caps and yelling because it's frustrating at times. But speaking to all these people, they are doing such great things, and they're so optimistic about the future of Hollywood that it really made me walk away with such an appreciation for all the people who work really hard in Hollywood.
So what do you have to now do? I mean, you have a responsibility as somebody who wrote a book to let people know about the book. So do you have things you have to do that are like, I have to do these mandatory things, or is it just you just do on your own?
And it's really just me on my own, you know.
Do you have like a PR person?
No, not really. There's a marketing team with the publishers, but it's really just me being like, I'll you know, I don't know.
Just jumping on the hottest podcast out there.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, you just go straight to the top. Huge PR bump.
Exactly. There's going to be a huge book spike.
I mean, we're on Spotify now. You know what I mean? Like, people have heard of Spotify.
That's huge.
That's so huge.
I love it.
I see. That's an example of me saying something that sounds really great. I honestly have no idea how that translates analytics wise.
It's cool though.
But yeah, it's when you tell somebody, hey, do you want to come over? We're on Spotify now, and they're like, ooh,
yes, I know what that is.
I know what Spotify is.
But I'm lucky that Fandango and Filmstruck, the 2 places I work, they are really supportive. So the PR guy at Fandango, Harry Medved, has been pushing on my behalf of, like, you know, newspapers and magazines and websites to get them to know about my book. How can we tie things in together? Same with Filmstruck. They're like, what can we do? They're affiliated with Turner Classic Movies. So they were like, we might sell this in our store. And they've been really supportive.
Have you seen this in a bookstore yet?
Not yet. It comes out August 15, and that's going to be a weird experience to see it in a store.
Okay, so, I mean, honestly, like, if I had a book in a store, I literally would walk into that store and just stand by it and go, "That's me, that's me,"
I
and
know.
not to be braggy, but just because it's such a weird thing. Because
Yeah.
I mean, you walk into bookstores your whole life, and like it's nothing. It's never about you
Yeah.
in there.
No.
It's you about somebody else, but the fact that it's about you
I
is like
know.
seeing yourself like on a movie poster, or you know
Yeah,
what I mean.
it's going to be insane. So I have a book signing coming up. So I've just organized a couple of really small
Yeah, let us know
things.
when are they happening?
So I just organized one really small book signing here in LA. It's at Skylight Books in Los Feliz on August the 20th, 5 p.m. And I've got my friend Maud Garrett coming along to
She's
talk
I
to
see
me.
in pictures with I look
Yeah.
at your Instagram. Is she
Yeah,
from SourceFed?
Yes, she
Yes.
was.
Okay.
She
Yeah.
was on SourceFed.
I try to vaguely follow that kind of
She's
stuff.
a fellow Aussie.
Yeah.
And she has always been so supportive, and she was really a great champion when I was writing this. Of like, I can't do this; it's too hard. She was like, "You can do it." So she's
So
going to
check
come
that out.
down and
Yeah. And the book comes out the 15th.
the 15th.
Where do we get it?
It's on Amazon right now,
Okay.
but it will be in bookstores. I don't know exactly where and how many, but I've been assured that it is in worldwide. But yeah, Amazon's probably your best bet. It's available to pre-order now.
Oh well, get it now. Backwards and Heels. I'm looking at it. It's a real book. I'm touching it. It's has a really cool. It just looks real. It has like kind of like a throwback kind of deco kind of thing going on.
My friend designed the cover,
Yeah.
and Hema Patel, and she did such a good job. I
It's
love
great.
it.
And where else can we find you?
You can find me all over the social media, at ALICIA Malone on Twitter. I'm the same on Instagram. And then I've got a YouTube channel, Movies Are My Jam, which is, all about indies and classic films, if that's your thing.
And it is everybody's thing.
should
It's just
be.
we should spend more time celebrating it.
Yes.
Also, we should spend a little time maybe subscribing to this podcast,
Yeah.
rating and giving it a comment. You know what I mean? Like, do that. That's fun. I'm at Twitter, Jason_Horton. And so I'm doing some reading I'm gonna do some dramatic reading from this book, if that's okay.
I would love that.
No, I want you to actually, people to actually buy the book. I don't want people. Also, I can't read.
Oh, no.
Spoiler alert.
How do you get through the day?
I don't. I do
You don't.
podcasts. I don't need to read.
Yeah.